The Adidas Adios 9 versus the Adidas Adios 8. What's new? What's changed? Is it still an Adios? And is it right for you? As I was planning this video, it hit me that the change between the Adios 8, which was a great Adios, to the Adios 9 is so massive that I can't really think of another shoe that changed this drastically in only one generation. The only other one that kind of comes to mind is the Adios 5 to the Adios 6. However, that was still basically an Adios. The foundational elements of what was an Adios, meaning multiple foams, a midfoot shank, a confining upper, were still both available there, though that was basically a downgrade from the 5. The 6 was not a great Adios. The 5 was a great Adios. But in this case, as much as I loved the Adios 8, the Adios 9 is a better Adios. A bit of a spoiler alert, but this shoe is quite good. As always with my versus videos, let's start with the specs. Now, the biggest two things to take note of here with the specs is that the drop in these two shoes, while on paper looks very similar, 7mm in the Adios 9 to 8mm in the Adios 8, they feel substantially different underfoot. In the Adios 9, because we have the new 2025 formula of Lightstrike Pro, the drop in that shoe feels much flatter. 3 to 5 is the real feel. I would even say, depending on how you strike the ground, it may even be a negative drop feel in that shoe. It's not, it just feels very flat. Whereas the drop in the Adios 8 is 8mm, but it does feel 6 to 8. It feels flat, but you do get the sense of the drop in that it puts you up on your toes. You're not getting that on the Adios 9. It's a very, very different feeling underfoot. The other big change here is the weight. The Adios 9 drops a substantial amount of weight, almost a full ounce. And that makes a huge difference on foot. While I do think the Adios 9 could be a little bit lighter, it's still an ultra lightweight traditional race flat, and it's very good. Now, the ride characteristics of these two shoes really respond to really the materials and the engineering in these shoes, and I'll get to that in the ride section of this video. But the Adios 9 is a very agile shoe. Like I said, it's the new Lightstrike Pro. You get a little sink, but you get a lot of resilience. You get a little pop off the toe, so it's a very agile ride. Whereas the Adios 8 is a very snappy ride. It's that classic Lightstrike Pro, not a lot of sink, but very, very sudden energy return and resilience in that foam, and it really snaps you off the toe. The torsion rods in that shoe also act a bit like a spike plate, making that shoe run even more snappy off the toe. Very different ride characteristics, both very good, but which one you're going to like is probably going to come down to your preferences. Moving to the outsole and the contact patch of these shoes, overall, from a dimension standpoint, there's actually not a substantial difference between these two shoes. The Adios 9 is slightly narrower, but it follows the same proportions as the Adios 8. And that really leads to that agile feeling that the Adios 9 has. But there's another big characteristic that really results in a very different ride, and you can see that very directly here. And that's the outsoles. If there is any one change between these two shoes that contributes to the difference in the ride, and there's a lot of changes between these two shoes, it has to be these outsoles. The Adios 9 has Adidas's new light traction outsole, which is a CPU, cast polyurethane outsole. It's not rubber. The only rubber on the outsole of the Adios 9 is that little yellow or greenish yellow part, which is continental rubber right under the big toe, but otherwise it's full coverage of the CPU outsole, the light traction outsole. That is a much more flexible, much lighter weight material that has better abrasion resistance and durability that gives the Adios 9 a much softer and much more nicer feel on the ground. You really feel the ground under your feet. Whereas with the Adios 9, this is sort of the classic where Adidas was. You've got that big chunk of continental rubber under the forefoot, and this is a very thick piece of rubber. It actually added to the ride of the Adios 8 and made the shoe feel much more substantial than it actually was underfoot. But it felt great, and it had a ton of grip and a ton of durability, but that was kind of the classic way of doing an outsole for Adidas. It also has the torsion system, which you can see as the pink rails. They go into the forefoot. They're really a midfoot shank that goes both into the heel and into the forefoot, but You know, that, as I said, rides a bit like a spike plate, makes the shoe a little bit stiffer than it would normally be, makes it more snappy off the toe. And then in the heel, you have a lot of geometry back there with two pieces of rubber that give you the heel protection and coverage. However, just looking at these, you can see how much more complicated the Adios 8 is than the Adios 9. And that is a substantial difference in the ride between these two shoes. And if we look at an exploded view of the Adios 8, you can just see how many parts are in play with this shoe. It is a very simple shoe fundamentally. It's an Adios. But there's that wedge of Lightstrike Pro on the forefoot. There's that other wedge of Lightstrike 2.0 in the heel. You can see the torsion rod system now that starts in the midfoot and goes into the heel and forefoot. You've got that big chunk of rubber, then the two pads on back. For such a small, lightweight, traditional race flat, there's a lot going on in this shoe. And all of this has been streamlined drastically in the update to the Adios 9. And if we look at the Adios 9, you can really see how strikingly simple this shoe is. It's a very simple upper. I'll get to the uppers in a moment. It's a one-piece Lightstrike Pro midsole. Again, this is the 2025 formula of Lightstrike Pro, meaning it's much more airy, much more open, much more resilient, much more flexible, much softer. There is a midfoot shank in this that sits right here. You can see a little line on the midsole tooling that shows you where the shank is. It's top loaded, sits right under the arch. It's really there just to control the twist in the shoe. There's no propulsiveness to it. It's something that's always been in an Adios, and it's much needed here given how soft and flexible the shoe is. And then you have an outsole. This is a very simple shoe, which I think really highlights where Adidas is going starting in 2025 with Adizero in general. Streamlining, simplifying everything, not just the design language. You can see a lot of Evo 1 design language in the shoe, but materials, engineering, geometry, everything is getting simpler, everything is getting more focused, everything is getting much, much better. Looking at the uppers of these two shoes, you can also see this drastic change. You can just look at it visually and see the massive change. Now, the Adios 8, while I did really like this upper, and I think this was probably the most successful of the Adizero uppers from the last generations, really the last 3 or 4 years, this is still, though, that classic old Adizero upper where it has a very plasticky mesh. This wasn't a Cellar mesh upper, but it's in that same ballpark. But this plasticky mesh, while it doesn't stretch, it doesn't give, which is nice for performance, it's also not very conforming to the foot. It's very harsh on the foot. If the shoe doesn't fit out of the box, good luck, because it's not going to stretch, it's not going to give, it's not going to break in, and it just creates a bunch of unnecessary friction and rub points on the foot. As I said, I do think the upper that was on the Adios 8 was probably the best one that Adidas managed to put together over maybe 3 or 4 years of doing this style of upper, but still, it wasn't the most pleasant on the foot. Where on the Adios 9, we have a completely new, softer textile, which I believe Adidas is calling microfit textile. It's kind of, think of almost like a ripstop. It's not a ripstop, but it's a no stretch material. At least it only stretches in one direction very minimally. And it's very soft, very conforming to the foot. Basically, everything I said about this upper, it's this upper, but opposite. It's just soft, conforming to the foot, very comfortable, doesn't create a lot of rub points. It's just a really pleasant upper. They went from very harsh, very uncomfortable uppers to a very nice, very soft, very conforming upper that fits the foot like a glove. And speaking of fit, since these are race flats, they do need to fit the foot really well, because a race flat is the type of shoe that just needs to go on the foot and completely disappear. And I will say both of these are very successful at doing that. However, the Adios 9 is just that much better because of this upper material and some of the engineering in this upper. Now, some of that engineering is quite important because we have the microfit textile, which is the bulk of the upper, but there's also a couple other technologies in here. We have the sling launch system, which we've seen in Adizero for a long time, but that pulls the heel into the midfoot. But we have something new called Light Lock, which is a band that runs along the base of the eyelet chain around the heel and really pulls the midfoot into the heel. So this really locks your foot into the shoe and really pulls the shoe against your foot. Really creates a beautiful lockdown, and I would say this is probably one of the best lockdowns in really any shoe, especially an Adizero shoe that I've run in some time. You can see in the heels there are some similarities though. These are still both Adizero heels, meaning they don't have a lot of structure in the heel counter in either one of these. So if you have had trouble with Adizero heels in the past, and this one was one that gave a lot of people trouble, The foundational design is still here. However, as you can see, there is more cushion around the ankle collar and the Achilles flare that really helps to alleviate a lot of the pressure points that these classic Adizero uppers would actually create. So I'm not getting any of that pressure around the Achilles or around the ankle that sometimes I could get in classic Adizero shoes. This is very soft, very conforming, very, very nice to put your foot in and run in. And lastly, as far as sizing, both of these are US men's size 9, so they're true to size for my foot. I didn't go any different in sizing between these two shoes, and they both fit nearly identically. I do think they're the same width. This shoe looks wider as far as the width in the forefoot area, but I do think they're the same. It's just the construction of the upper on this and the way the upper sort of sits over the midsole just makes this look a little bit wider, but I do think they're the same width. As far as toe box volume, there is a little bit more volume in this, and I think that's just the softness of the upper material. But I would say both of these are true to size, and if you, whatever size you wore in the Adios 8, probably is going to be the same size in the Adios 9. Let's move to the ride of these two shoes, but I'm going to start with the Adios 8, and this is a little bit of a goodbye to the Adios 8 because I really genuinely loved running in this shoe. And I think for the 2023 generation when this shoe came out, this was the de facto Adizero daily trainer. There wasn't really another Adizero daily trainer. Yes, the SL was around, but this was a better shoe. And because of this big chunk of rubber up here, as I said, this shoe ran more substantial than the 20 mil 28 in the heel that was in this shoe to the specs. This was a great shoe that felt substantial underfoot, but still gave you some ground feel and connect you to the ground. You understood where you were in space. Proprioceptive feedback, for those of you listening for that. And this was a great shoe. I really enjoyed running in this. As I said, the ride was very snappy. A lot of that was because of the stiffness of this, and that was, similar to all of the Adizero shoes of this generation. They were all very firm, all very stiff. And again, this torsion system really made this shoe stiffer and snappier. But it was a great shoe. It was very durable. It was very nice to run in. It was very versatile. You could do easy running to picking up and doing workout type running, session type running. This was just a very, very good shoe. And when I was thinking about what the Adios 9 was going to become, I wanted a full Lightstrike Pro midsole, and I was hoping that this torsion system would go away, and I was going to be happy with that. Even if they didn't change the upper, even if they left this big chunk of rubber in the forefoot, I was going to be happy with that shoe. And what we got with the Adios 9 was really remarkable. I got my full-length Lightstrike Pro midsole, but we got it in the new updated 2025 formula, the more airy, more resilient, more bouncy formula. And that changes the ride characteristic of this shoe drastically. On top of that, the CPU outsole gives you so much more flex, so much more feel, and cuts so much weight off the shoe because this material is much lighter, much more durable, but it gives you much more feel underfoot. So this shoe is masterful for feeling the ground under your foot. It's not feeling every rock and pebble under your foot. It's more, how you're interfacing with the ground. You can feel that strike and you can feel the energy transfer. Something really important for runners to know to understand their form. This shoe does that masterfully in a very durable, very capable package. Because even though this is the softer, more airy, more resilient new Lightstrike Pro, it's still giving you all that protection. It doesn't feel like you're touching the ground. It doesn't feel like it's compacting in. You get a tiny bit of sink and you get a lot of resilience off the toe. So far, this shoe's not really compressing into the ground. The foam is standing very strong and being very resilient. I'm very, very impressed with this foam in the shoe. I did not expect it to be as good as it is. So overall, this is a substantial upgrade that has a very different feel, still very much an Adios, but just simpler, better, more direct, more resilient, more fun, and ultimately more usable. Another way to see this is with my performance matrix. So if we put the Adios 9 and the Adios 8 on here, starting with the Adios 9, I really find that this shoe works for steady into max effort. It really likes max effort. To me, it's a session shoe. It's a workout shoe. Speed, intervals. It does that extremely well. But if we put the Adios 8 on here, the Adios 8 also did that as well too. I do think the top end for the Adios 8 wasn't quite there. I think the Adios 9, because of the added resilience, the added flex to the shoe, I do think you're getting more top end in that shoe. And I don't think the Adios 8 did steady as well. It did want to go faster, but the range is very similar. The sweet spot is very similar, and that's that orange or red area in the yellow area. But both of these shoes, for some of us, have a secondary kind of sweet spot, and that's really in easy running. Those of us who used to train a lot in race flats, this is before the super shoe era, still like to run a lot in low stack race flats. We like to do easy running in race flats, and both of these shoes did easy running remarkably well. The Adios 8 was a firmer, more durable feeling underfoot ride. However, I think the Adios 9 is just the more fun, more versatile, and just as durable ride underfoot. So both these shoes have that secondary sweet spot of easy running, especially if you are a runner who used to train a lot in race flats. While I think this is a remarkable update and it's time to say goodbye to this one, which is a little sad because this was a great Adios, I'm really happy that this is the shoe that's replacing it. And as I mentioned a few times in this video, this shoe is really resonating with all of the changes, all of these drastic changes that the Adizero lineup is currently going through. The big shift that we saw with the Adios 5 into 6 around 2020, 2021, as Adidas was exploring new geometries, new engineering, new materials, and they were moving into what they've really done for the past 4 years. This shoe and its partner in the Adios Pro 4, which really come out of what they started with the Evo 1, really I think is setting Adidas Adizero up for the next 4 years of this big shift. This is a massive change in Adizero, and I think this shoe really symbolizes all of the best of the engineering that's yet to come. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this video useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.